So, Paul Waters, we're here today to talk about your long-awaited book, Blackwatertown, which has just been published by Unbound. Now, I should declare an interest at this point, really, because I met you a long time ago when you were blogging, and I've been waiting a long time for this book to appear. And just to get the record straight before we wade into anything, it's a great read, it's a page turner, and it's unputdownable. Now, that's for the record.
That's good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Happy with that.
Good. But before we talk about the book, can you give me some idea of your own background, and particularly your background in Northern Ireland to start with, which is dramatic enough?
Okay. Well, I suppose you're probably one of the people who has known about this, but for the longest time, because as you were saying, knowing each other on blogs and that. So that's a bit embarrassing for me. I can't sort of lie about how long I've been thinking about it, how many years. But yeah, I'm from Northern Ireland. I'm from Belfast. I grew up there, and then I moved to Dublin to work in my late teens, and lived and worked in Dublin for a while, and then I've been in England and Wales and back in Belfast. When I came back, I was working for the BBC as a TV reporter and a radio reporter and a producer in the newsroom there, and also doing current affairs. And I did that for a while, and then back to Britain doing various radio stations, Radio 4, 5 Live, World Service, Times Radio, various indies, Channel 5, that sort of thing. And some of it news, some of it current affairs, arts, that sort of stuff. But I've always had the book in the back of my mind, wanting to do that. And yeah, so it's good to be able to have it in my hand and have it out.
Well, it's clear you have your soul in the book, and I hope you have a bit more soul to spare. But we'll come to that later. In leaving Northern Ireland, you weren't driven out or anything.
I wasn't. I mean, I have relatives who were, but I suppose I was a bit sick of it as a teenager, because it used to be the centre of the town would be empty. Apart from security patrols, there wasn't lots happening. People had fun, I suppose, but when I moved to Dublin, it was a real eye-opener. It was just fantastic. There was good music, police were friendly, you could walk along the canal, there was stuff happening, didn't rain as much, and there were beautiful women from all over Ireland.
Wow.
It was just it was a great place, and to just feel freer and that sort of thing. And the odd time when I would go back up home to Belfast on the train, I'd arrive at the central station and be waiting for a bus near the city hall, and there'd be nobody there, nobody, except maybe an army patrol would go by, or police in an armoured car or something, armoured Land Rover. And I'm thinking, well, I suppose it is Sunday, so there's not that much happens. And then it would dawn on me, this is Friday evening. It's not a Sunday, and it just felt, it's like, come on, back. But obviously, Belfast has changed a lot.
Yeah.
It's way, way, way better, and there's some great places to go there. And I love going back now to St. George's Market, or various pubs, Madden's or the Sunflower, and No Alibis. Botanic Avenue, one of my favourite places to walk along. Good secondhand bookshops and No Alibis. That's a really great bookshop. And yeah, I've grown to like it again. I'm friends with it again.
But my big shock, I first went to Belfast, where we were going to Bangor for a holiday, and my big shock was the armed police force. That struck me very, very forcibly. And then we were staying in a terrace of houses opposite the Picky Pool in Bangor. And the next shock was on the 12th of July, our landlord was out with a sash marching. But you grew up in the Troubles, basically, as I understand it. Did you have to do very much research to place the setting back in the end of the 50s, which was a less violent period, really, at the end of
yeah, I suppose it, like when I was growing up, that informed me. I suppose the atmosphere of violence, and I suppose in sectarianism and division. I was lucky enough that I was always crossed the religious lines. My parents were kind of tolerant and open to people, and I was brought up a Catholic, but I associated with a lot of Protestants of various denominations and various organizations, and I was later on in the Peace People, and I did interdenominational stuff there. But like with football leagues that crossed the religious lines, and residential holidays for young people, that sort of thing. But the thing about setting the story in the 50s, there were two reasons for that. One, it's kind of a bit safer because it feels longer ago, and if you're going to be referring to stories, there's less chance of getting in trouble because the people are still, I was going to say paranoid, but just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you, and you have to respect people's concerns when you hear stories. And I could talk about things that happened to me or people close to me, but then I have to take into account their feelings about it, and do I have the right to share it? And the other reason for the 50s was I used to hear good stories about it from relations of mine who were in the police back then in the RUC. They were Catholics in the RUC. And in the 1950s, as you know, there was this IRA insurgency, the border campaign. And there were some other groups as well involved, but it was mainly the IRA. And they were trying to drive, I suppose, British forces back from the border. And, people forget that the Troubles didn't just come out of nowhere. There had been periods of violence beforehand, but it wasn't to the same intensity. And it was a complete failure. And the main reason for that was Catholics or nationalists didn't embrace it. They didn't support the campaign. And also in the Republic of Ireland, there was severe crackdown on the IRA south of the border as well. But I heard great stories about it, and I thought, yeah, we have to share these stories. They're too good not to be shared. But fiction seemed a safe way of doing it. And then, of course, it took on a life of its own, and it's fiction, so I've made a load of it up, and brought in some other stories that were not political. So it's not like a political rant or anything like that. There's a story about a child that features in it, which is also based on a true story, but completely separate. But I've combined them, and there's been a lot of artistic license involved. But when you're hearing stories like, I didn't include this in the book actually, but somebody was telling me they were out on patrol during this insurgency, during the border campaign, on a police patrol with various kind of armored vehicles and mounted heavy machine guns and this sort of thing. Anyway, they got lost, and they accidentally invaded the centre of Clones and in Monaghan. So they got lost, drove south of the border, in armed convoy, found themselves in the centre of Clones, and then realised, oh, quick, we've got to get back to the north before anyone sees us. So quick, U-turn, driving back up into the north, and completely accidental, they'd say, and
really
stupidity. But luckily, they didn't encounter the guards or the army or Republican paramilitaries or anything, or just ordinary people. That what's happening here? So there are loads of things like that, and you don't read about that in history books. I suppose they're too small, and often people, cover them up because they get in trouble if they reported them at the time. So
there are things called unapproved roads, and I don't know if that exists in any other borders, but the northern border is so porous that a hot pursuit and all of this sort of stuff is a real problem between the jurisdictions.
Well, there was one a story that I have used, like a true story that doesn't appear in history books, linked to just what you're talking about. So whenever there was a time of tension, maybe an election campaign, the northern authorities would go out and make holes in the roads or barricade them or blow up a little humpback bridge, anything to prevent people accessing the north via all these hundreds of little lanes, which was really inconvenient for people who lived there or had farmland on both sides or just wanted to go to the shops or to church, so they didn't like this. But so there'd be holes in the road dug all over the place. Anyway, so one particular patrol, they were driving along, and there was, I think, a trench dug by the B Specials, the Protestant militia who came out to support the police at times of tension. So, and they accidentally drove into this hole.
You're being very polite about the B Specials, but carry on.
Well, anyway, they so they were driving along in this police car, and they accidentally drove into a hole in the road, and the guy in the back, his machine gun went off accidentally. So this is terrible. He obviously hadn't got it secured safely, although it could have been faulty. And he was endangering his comrades in the car. It was like bad, really, really bad. He's going to get into big trouble. So they pretended they'd been ambushed, cover up this incompetence, and they reported it. But then, of course, to make it convincing, they properly shot up the car.
Really?
Really, really went for it.
Wow.
And oh yeah, we were ambushed. We fought them off. Heroic endeavor. And then this is reported up the chain of command, gets to headquarters in Belfast. The next thing, the Prime Minister is talking about it on the radio. It's an election airing thing, and he said, "Oh, we've come under attack. The IRA, Ulster will never surrender," that sort of thing. Completely fake. Although, I guess the police and the Prime Minister weren't aware of that. And so then these guys, their cover-up was taken on huge proportions, and that's the official version is there was this ambush, which never actually happened. And I only know that from hearing it at first hand.
Well, I was thrilled by the way that story took legs, but I was assuming.
Well, in my version of the story, that kicked off the whole campaign.
I was assuming you were adding to it, whereas what you're now telling me is you weren't adding to it. This actually happened.
Well, it happened, but the difference is, in my version, this starts the war.
Yeah, surely it's the consequences. The
consequences, because in my version, they've got, the IRA in Dublin are thinking now's not the time, but this happens, and they think, oh, somebody else is trying to steal the liberation torch from us, so we'd better assert ourselves and get on with it. So then they react off the back of to who these pretenders are, stealing their position in the independence struggle. So in reality, this happened during the campaign when it was already underway. But it's fiction.
I loved the election campaign and your jolly mackin at the hustings. I thought that was, and I'm not going to say any more about it, which I didn't in my blog either. People can read it. It is a pivotal moment in the whole story. I'm still smiling about it.
Yeah, I made that. That is made up.
Yeah, well, I gathered it was, but I also thought, like, maybe I have a bit of background in it and I'm a bit more conscious, but I also thought that your portrayal of the panic of the armchair Republicans in the South when they suddenly were going to be drawn into actual action. I thought I really enjoyed that bit, because we've put up with a lot of that stuff down here. But getting back again to the book, your ending is very dramatic, I must say, and it certainly came as a body blow to me. And we won't discuss what it is. But have you got any reactions from this ending? It's not a usual ending to a story. Let's put it.
Well, yeah, the most. I mean, some people said it made them cry, but there was one particular person who read it before it was published. And he read this and he was so angry. He said, "If you don't change it, I'm going to come over and I'm going to punch you in the face," because he was so cross about the ending. And I thought, well, this is wonderful. If I'm
absolutely
provoking a reaction like that, I'm definitely not changing it. So I haven't encountered him. He's over in Belfast, so I haven't been able to see him. But you want to get strong reactions. Absolutely. And there was a book I remember reading a long time ago, Ripley Bogle by Robert McLean Wilson, and there's an unreliable narrator in that. And I was following along, and there's a revelation that comes towards the end, and I was so angry with him. I was so cross with Robert McLean Wilson.
Yes,
that he kind of betrayed and he cheated me, and I was so cross. And then I took a moment and I thought, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
that they haven't provoking an intense reaction like that is wonderful. Now, this is different, but the idea of having an intense reaction that's great as far as I'm concerned.
Well, your reaction there was precisely the same as my reaction to the end of your book. Only we're in a virtual space at the moment, so I can't really reach out.
I'm glad we're at a safe distance. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing is you mentioned some of the incidents. Your characters are very real. Jolly is very real. The two other guys and the superintendent and whatever he is in the RIC barracks, they're all very real, and all this sort of snide stuff that's going on, undercurrents going on all the time. I found myself reacting to it quite violently some of the time. But to what extent are these real people, or are they a mash of real people, or what are you drawing on there for the characters?
Well, they're based on, I guess, people that I've encountered over the years. I've encountered a lot of police over the years, but they're not really individuals from history or from life. They're creations of mine. But I suppose you don't want to give too much away. I suppose the sergeant in the Blackwatertown RUC barracks, he was definitely, I didn't like him at the start, but as the story went on and I got to know him more, there are sides to him that are a lot more sympathetic.
Yeah, yeah.
And also, people have faces that they put on at different times. Maybe they want to seem more aggressive and frightening at times to deter aggression towards them and to bolster their authority. But gradually, they let show other sides of them. And I guess the truth is as well that people aren't completely, usually, 100% one thing or another. So you have to have nuances. And I also found when I was a reporter in the north, often you'd meet people who had great charisma, great fun to be with. They'd done terrible things, and there's the risk that you'd be seduced by what good crack they were, and what good conversationalists, and just by their charisma. But you had to sort of remind yourself, this is the guy who did X, Y, Z, and that's you have to walk that and try and get access, obviously, but not get too seduced by them.
Well,
it was a bit like that with the characters.
I have to say it's a tribute to your characters that I was determined not to like these guys from the beginning, because that's where I'm coming from. So you did succeed there, I must say, in making sympathetic characters out of people that I normally wouldn't have any truck with. Although I do remember one occasion when we were on the peace program, we had a function in the Guildhall in Derry. And I was parking a Southern registered car in the square outside the Guildhall because we had stuff to unload to bring in. And I asked this RUC fella, I said, is there a car park around here? He said, leave it there. I'll look after it, you see. So I was very suspicious of this. And I said to him, yeah, but I'll be here all day. I said, will you be still here? No, he said, I said, well, you better tell the next fella it's me. But like the traditional sort of, and I did find out with the peace program as well, that there was, and I know it's not our subject here, but that there was an evolution of relationships in the course of people working with one another, which I think hopefully has borne some fruit. Although I'd say Brexit will probably get a lot of it off again. In the barracks scene, the attack on the barracks, like that is such a visual and noisy scene that you actually feel it. It's the movement in it is fabulous, and I had sort of what will I say, cross loyalties in it, because I was sympathetic to poor old Jolly in the barracks, an RUC man defending an RUC barracks. But I have a cousin who was sentenced to death during the War of Independence for a raid on an RIC barracks, the equivalent police barracks in the south. So I was sort of drawn in a number of directions on that one,
Well, but I suppose that is maybe the most famous part of that historical period, that there are songs about, come all you young rebels, unleashed while I sing.
Yes.
The Patriot game.
Yes.
Right. So there's that song, and there's another one as well, Sean South of Gary Owen.
Gary Owen, which is a heavy job. Yeah.
So that's this is another version of that, but they're strong echoes of it, and I suppose young people getting sucked into things that by older adults. I suppose it's one thing adults doing it. You can have your views on that, the rights and wrongs, but bringing I guess, children, really,
Yeah,
young teenagers in, which is still happening today. That's
absolutely.
maybe something we could agree on isn't so good.
Yeah, yeah. In the book, for me, it turned out, coming from one side, it turned out to be a very balanced book. And you seem to have sort of rationed out your swipes in both directions in almost equal measure. And I'm just wondering, how did you calculate these? And poor Jolly is assaulted from both sides. He's ridiculed initially, and then sort of he's the enemy almost inside the inside the RUC. And then, I mean, there must be a sense of betrayal of his own people for joining up with this sectarian police force. So you seem to have a load of different balances there that you seem to have uh, got right effectively at the end of the day.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, there are lots of balances, and I didn't have a tally mark of ticks. Who have I not slagged off for 10 pages? But I mean, the nature of the role of Catholics in the police in Northern Ireland has gone through various changes,
Yeah,
and there were always a minority, I suppose, but and then they became a really shrunken minority, and because I guess they were asked to implement things that they maybe didn't agree with, that weren't right. Also, they were targeted, just like other, it doesn't matter what your religion is, and but also there've been the ability to be in your community changed. I mean, it used to be there were loads of police living, off the Falls Road and in West Belfast, and just in the community. I suppose the original neighbourhood policing, police on your street. I remember there was one my parents would talk about called Pig Maneely, but he wasn't called Pig Maneely because an insult against the police or the pigs. It was because he had pigs, and so you'd have to watch out if you were, not going to school because there'd be police all around and they would know you. But then that became, you couldn't live in the community there anymore. You'd be at risk, and maybe you didn't want to be in the police anymore. It was a dangerous thing. I know lots who left, and maybe they stayed in policing, but just not in
yeah,
Northern Ireland. So they went south or to Hong Kong or Jamaica or over to England more,
Palestine. Yeah, yeah,
or,
yeah,
yeah, or Hong Kong,
yeah,
and and got up to dodgy stuff in all those places. But
yeah,
they, the yeah, and but also there's the idea that if you're in an organization, doesn't matter the differences between you inside the organization. It's kind of the insiders against the outsiders, and that's not just nationalists. It could be loyalists. It's like, are you in the club or are you a
oh yeah.
civilian outside the club?
Any
So
administration, yeah, yeah, yeah,
that helps. I guess it all seems that there's so many complicated balances that who do you trust? I suppose because you're stepping across different lines, and you can't really nail your colors to one mask once you join, because who's going to believe you? Because even if you do fully convert, kind of thing, then
yeah,
who's going to trust a turncoat anyway?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So where do you go? And that's the fate, I think, of, I guess, native people who sign up to the colonial power across the world. If they start to pull out and withdraw, you could be left high and dry.
oh yeah,
So
from both sides.
yeah.
Could,
So what do you do?
could we get it onto your publisher? Would you like to say a few words about your publisher, which seems I don't know if it's novel or if it has been going on for a long time, but the actual mechanics of how you found a publisher and then what happened after that?
Well, yeah. So Blackwatertown is published by Unbound, which is kind of an unusual publisher in England. I think the first book they did was by Terry Jones, one of the Monty Python guys. So they've published various high-profile people and won prizes and that sort of thing. But the way they do it is it's like a mainstream publisher. They assess what they want to publish. Is this any good? Is it worth it? Do we want it? So that's traditional. But then, having done that, they kind of ask you to prove the market. Like, is there really a market for this book? So then that's where advanced sales come in. So you have to convince a load of people this is good, it's worth ordering. And so they get enough orders in advance. They think, well, there's definitely a market. Let's go with it. And that's like yourself. You get the earliest copies in your hand or on your ebook reader.
And name in the book.
Yeah, and your name in the book, that's true.
Yes.
And then they do everything in a normal way, structural edit. I had a really good structural editor guy, Russell McLean, who's a writer. His latest book is called Ed's Dead, which I just read the other day. Highly recommend it, very fast, set in Scotland. But so he was my structural editor. There was a copy editor, proofreader, cover designer. Mark E. Cobb designed the cover. So nice bit of green. And, I gave him my suggestions, but he did it. So that's all out of my hands. And they organize the printing and they ship it out then to the normal wholesalers and to shops and bookshops around, Ireland, North and South, and Great Britain. And so that's kind of, it's all back to normal.
Yeah.
Normal publisher, except I suppose, what is normal these days? Because you like to be an author, it'd be nice you write the book, somebody publishes it, gives you some money, and you just sit back and watch other people do all the work, all the legwork,
all this stuff.
These days you have to promote yourself, you have to market yourself. And if you just sit back and nothing happens, well, it's kind of, you've only got yourself to blame. So I've been contacting bookshops, and loads of them have been, very responsive and really lovely, and saying, yeah, we like the look of this, we are ordering it.
Yeah.
And then people like yourself are saying, I'll share the news about it, or newspapers, or on the radio, and but that's kind of down to the author, I think, to put yourself out there, really.
Can I make a visual remark? I don't know if you can see this on your screen, but since you put your book down in front of you, the green light is shining up on your face, and you look like you have been face painted highly appropriately, but maybe you'd shift the book for the moment.
Right, okay.
Or whatever it is.
The light is the sun might have come out or something like that.
You have an endorsement from Frederick Forsyth on your cover, in fact. How did that arise? I mean, I'm a great fan of the Jackal. It was a real twist turner right through to the end, like your own. And it's anyway. How did you?
Well, I've had to I bumped into him a few times. Obviously, I'd read his books, starting with The Day of the Jackal, which I still go back and read.
Oh yeah.
And the original film, I'd still rewatch that. I mean, it's so good. So he apparently wrote that in a month, and because I interviewed him once for a radio show, and he wrote it in a month, and that's what he sent off to the publisher, and that's what was published, pretty much, which is pretty amazing, quite unusual. I had some dealings with him. I studied African history and literature and politics, and he had a great interest in West Africa, in the Biafran War of Independence, the Nigerian Civil War. He used to work for the BBC, and he quit over what he felt was the unfair coverage of that conflict and the British government's role in it. And went on to be the writer that we know. And so I was, I just asked him, we sometimes see him in the pub, and he doesn't endorse people very much.
Yeah.
And he probably wasn't that keen, but I wore him down. And he very kindly read the book, and gave me his thoughts, and was happy for me to have his endorsement. So
at the end of the day, not only have you got his endorsement, but you are proclaiming him from the cover of your book. So you're repaying a certain amount of kind,
Well, I think I'm benefiting, really. I don't know if he feels he's getting much out of the deal, but I was thinking of Brian McGilloway when you were talking about Brexit and the border. I mean, I don't know if I think Brian McGilloway is a great writer. He's up in, I think he's Strabane at the minute. He's from Derry, and he talks about how relationships have developed, cross-border relationships between the Guards and the RUC, and now the Police Service of Northern Ireland. And in his books, you can see that the barriers are coming down as the books go on, and they're working more together. And now he's thinking, Brexit, what do I do? It's kind of a backward step. And it's in his real life, but also he's thinking, the way the books are going, what happens now? And I see he's written a standalone book set mostly in Scotland, which is really good, The Last Crossing. But he's going to have to go back, and I'll be interested to see how he's going to handle this new reality wherever it ends up, and we don't quite know yet. But he said he's on the book, he's endorsed it, and Peter May and Tony Kent, he's a newish writer, he's very good, and Jared Brennan, Dundrum writer, he's there too.
Yeah,
so I'm very happy.
You're off to a flying start.
I am.
What you mentioned about his experience of the barriers coming down cross border. I mean, I have a parallel experience to that because I chaired the monitoring committee for the EU peace programme, and it was quite clear that barriers were coming down because there were grants available for cross-community projects and all this sort of stuff. And then we had Canary Wharf. And it was very interesting. Inez McCormack, who was from ICTO at the time, she was on the committee, and her summing up of I mean, Canary Wharf just blew a hole in everything, and her summing up was that there were no new contacts being established, but the contacts that had already been established were holding, which was very it was encouraging under the circumstances. But can I just throw two things at you? I've become very attached to Jolly, I have to say. So my question is there any prospect of a prequel or a sequel? Or
a prequel? That's,
yeah.
I hadn't thought of that.
I'm trying to give you as many opportunities.
I know. Okay. Well, the sequel, yeah. That's a bit of a spoiler alert for like whether he lasts through the book, I suppose. But yeah, sequel is in the works, let's say.
And he's lasted through your book.
Yeah, I know. Well, he's gonna last into book 2 anyway, at least.
Yes,
and he goes traveling a bit. He travels a bit more widely.
Well, you can count me in on the
okay, well, that's good.
And the prequel. And my other one, my other last question is: the book moves at a pace. The characters are three-dimensional. The action is real. I mean, I saw all this happening in front of me as I was reading the book. So I have to ask you about the film rights. Has anyone approached you yet on the film rights? Well,
I have retained the film rights. I have been approached by a production company, but it's the earliest of earliest possible days. So obviously I'd love that, whatever kind of a thing. But I've no news there really. But when there is, I'll let you know.
Do please, yeah, because it lends itself very much. I mean, it's a very fast-moving thriller visual book,
There's an audiobook coming out. It's not quite the same thing.
No. I've
W.F. Howes are publishing the
audiobook in my life. But listen, can I say, just winding up, that it's a great pleasure talking to you. The book is a great read. And do you want to just recite where the book can be got and what your website is?
Oh, right. Okay.
But I'll reproduce that in a blog post as well. But just for this to be a standalone.
Yeah. So you can get Blackwatertown in various ways, and they're all listed on my website, which is www.paulwatersauthor.com. That's Paul Waters, Waters, author.com. And so I suppose in Northern Ireland, No Alibis on Botanic Avenue. That's prime place. Also the Secret Bookshelf in Carrickfergus, and in Cookstown, and then in Row River Books in Dundalk, over in Sligo, Dublin, various shops all the way across to Limerick and down to Cork. In England, then it's in lots of counties in England and different shops in Scotland, up on the Isle of Mull and Glasgow and Edinburgh. Anyway, they're all on the website listed. It's on Amazon, of course, as well. Or you could go straight to the publishers Unbound. And if all those fail, you can just contact me directly. And I'll sort you out, as people have me doing from Australia and, foreign countries in Spain and that sort of thing in America.
It just shows how much marketing you've done as well as the writing and the patience in this. But I would just add a final comment that it's not a bad thing that the book took so long to write, because I have a feeling that it was being slowly crafted along the way. And there is a very finished polish on the book, if you know
Well,
what I.
that's good. I suppose I did it and then I left it for a while. I think it's a good idea to leave things, and
Oh yeah,
so when you can come back to them with a colder eye and be more ruthless in cutting them down. So it was a lot longer. I mean, it's thick enough the way it is, but I cut it by maybe about a third, not quite, and it's far better for that, and it faster pace for one thing, and you can, just be more ruthless and less emotionally attached, and so you have a come up with a better product, and also gives time for some other people to read it, because um, so I do a podcast, We'd Like a Word, and my partner there, Stephen Colgan, the presenter, his motto is, if someone tells you something is wrong with your book or there's a problem, they're probably right. But if they tell you the solution, they're probably wrong. It's up to you to the solution. But giving people time, no point in a way blaming the reader for not getting what you want them to get. It's your job to make them get it, to write it so that it works. And if you don't, you're the one to blame. So leaving time for some people to read it and react, maybe threaten to punch me in the face or whatever. I don't have to take their advice on board, or maybe I can take it on board, but in the opposite way from which they intend. But
yeah.
that's all a benefit. And, I can learn from their reactions and learn, what works, what doesn't work, and what things I accidentally got right. And then if that happens, you just sort of take the praise and pretend you meant it all along.
Listen, Paul Waters, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure.